New York Giants defensive coordinator Shane Bowen broke the mold to help steer the Giants to their first win of 2024. We'll take a look at that, plus the Giants kicker dilemma and more with special guest Paul Dottino of WFAN. That's coming your way next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI.com, which is where you can find my written work. And as always, welcome on into my Blue Crew community members, to my newcomers, to my everydayers, and everybody else in between. Thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, please consider subscribing to the channel. Click the little notification bell so that you are notified every time I post a new video, and like the video, as it all helps with the algorithm. And if you are listening on our audio platforms, please consider giving us a 5-star review. It would be appreciated. All right, on today's Locked On Giants podcast, I'm happy to welcome in New York Giants veteran beat reporter. He's also a member of the team's broadcasting team, Paul Dottino of WFAN. Paul, the Giants won on Sunday. You got to be thrilled, I'm sure.
Well, for all of us who cover the team, it is quite a relief because, as we all know, it's a lot easier to deal with the players and the coaches when they are happy. And a win usually makes players and coaches happy. The frustration over what has been going on through the first 2 weeks was rather disappointing to see. But, you know, there's a lot of relief. I think that locker room yesterday following the game was one of relief. That's the best word I could use to describe it. They weren't celebratory. And let me make that very clear. You know, a lot of people were curious. I know I got some questions on even the radio postgame show about, you know, were the Giants overjoyed with the victory, having finally cracked the seal? And the answer is no. They were relieved. It was like, oh, we could breathe again. You know, we did a number of good things and we won a game. All right, now let's regroup. Let's take another shot of oxygen and move on to a very important week against the Cowboys.
Indeed. And before we get to the Cowboys, we're going to recap a little bit on the Giants' victory. Shane Bowen, defensive coordinator, broke his mold. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Then we're going to talk about the kicker situation because, yes, believe it or not, the Giants are at another crossroads with the kickers. And then segment 3 today, we will talk about the parade of tight ends that the Giants worked out. And if there's anything to it, why maybe the Giants are looking at all these tight ends. So, Paul, let's start off with the Giants defense, which played lights out. Shane Bowen breaking the mold, really went after quarterback Deshaun Watson. I think I saw a stat that he blitzed over 50% of the dropbacks, 8 sacks as a result. I think they had something like, 17 hits or something like that.
It was crazy. The final total was 17 quarterback hits and 8 sacks by 9 different players, getting at least half a sack apiece, and only the 4th time since 1970 that's happened, or actually since 1982 when the sack became official. Patty, it was crazy.
Yeah, it definitely was. And you know, it was interesting because the Giants were facing a banged up Cleveland offensive line. Were you surprised that Bowen decided to go blitz crazy? Like, you know, it was almost like we were watching a weak Martindale defense being run there.
And that's really what kind of hit my mind as I'm watching the game. I'm like, what happened? Did Wink come back and help coach this team? Because it was so different than anything that Shane Bowen's usually done. We know that his time as defensive coordinator at the Titans showed us a coach that is anti-blitz. He wants to play with those standard front four guys, put all the burden on them, mix up things in the back seven, play a lot of zone. And all of a sudden, as we're watching this game unfold, there's a linebacker blitz. There's a corner blitz. There's a safety blitz. He's using a zone blitz. And I'm watching this, and I'm like scratching my head. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute here. This is not what we saw the first 2 weeks or what Bowen's reputation is about, which on one hand surprised the living crap out of me, okay, on one hand. On the other hand, if we're going to give Shane Bowen credit for being as good a defensive coordinator as we say he is, shouldn't that mean he's willing to adjust? Because that's exactly what he did. He saw that the Cleveland offensive line, based on the previous 2 weeks when they had given up 8 sacks, was definitely suspect. We know that Deshaun Watson is one of those quarterbacks who fractures like a glass doll in the middle of a jewelry store when he gets pressured. And so Shane Bowen said, all right, I know what it is that's in my DNA. I know what's in my blood. I know I don't like to blitz. But against this team and this opponent, it looks like the formula is to send a whole bunch of heat. And so he broke his own mold to go and attack the Browns' offense's weakness. And I salute him for that, because not every coach is going to literally break his own mold. They may tweak things a little bit, but they're not going to break the entire mold, to go with the other team. He did.
Yeah, he did indeed. And, I thought the defense also played with a little bit more of an edge. Coming into the week, Dexter Lawrence talked about being ticked off over, what had happened against the Commanders. And you just kind of got the sense, or at least I did when I was talking to the guys in the locker room, the defensive players, that they were angry, that they were ready to take out their frustration on Cleveland. Did you get that same sense?
Well, I think that Bowen challenged them when he told the media last week that he was particularly unhappy with the missed tackles. Now, honestly, Patty, you've been around the game long enough to know, what are the two things that you could say to a player that's going to hit them right in the heart and right in the gut, especially a defensive player? If you say that they're soft, right? If they're soft, quote, making business decisions, which Antonio Pierce used on the Raiders this past weekend, or they're missing tackles. Because defensive players are supposed to like to hit. They're supposed to want to tackle people. So when you say those things against a defensive player who supposedly has pride, chances are it's going to get the hair up on the back of their necks. So I think Bowen, I don't want to say he was a button pusher. I don't want to say that, because I don't think he was exaggerating when he said the Giants were missing too many tackles. What was the number I had them down for? Missing like 12 tackles over the first 2 weeks.
That's a lot.
Isn't horrible, but it's not great. And this past weekend, I didn't like the Browns' second touchdown drive. Okay? They had missed tackles on that second Browns touchdown drive. It was the only possession of the game where I thought the Giants were really guilty of missing tackles. Part of it was Watson's elusiveness on that one scramble. But they also didn't take down Jerome Ford on one of his runs on that drive too, when they had 3 shots at him and they didn't get him down. That drive was a missed tackle tape, and it led to a touchdown. And I talked to Bobby Okereke afterwards, because Bobby's a captain, the middle linebacker. He's very sensitive to missed tackles. He knows that. And I mentioned that specifically to him, and he agreed. He said, yeah, that was the drive. Other than that, we were clean with our tackling. That, to me, was the biggest difference.
Yeah, definitely want to clean that up and eliminate that from the game. And, maybe as they go on, who knows, maybe they'll start to reduce the number of missed tackles that they're having a game. At least you would hope they would as they go on. So, all right, coming up next, The Giants, do they have a kicker problem? We'll talk a little bit about that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. They help you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but who might be open for the perfect role. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours when they use LinkedIn. And did you know that LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier? They've just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process quicker. Find out why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring by posting your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, everybody, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. My guest is Paul Dottino, Giants WFAN on Twitter, or X as it's now known, member of the Giants broadcast team. He also has his own podcast now, Big Blue Breakdown, which you can find on the New York Giants on SI YouTube channel. He does a live stream. He is doing a live stream actually on Wednesday, and you can actually call in. And I use that, call in, because you can go right into the studio to talk to Paul live, just like I'm talking to him now. And I guarantee you, folks, he gives you a great answer. I've seen some of the pods, and he does a great job. He gets to everybody. I don't know how he does it, but he does. So anyway, Paulie, let's talk about the Giants kicker situation. Now, interestingly, Greg Joseph, other than for the missed field goal, which probably was the most important thing, not a horrible showing for his first day out.
Patty, he could have clinched the game. That's like, right, asking Mrs. Lincoln if she liked the play, right?
No, I know that. I know.
I mean, honestly, 48-yard field goal in this league is practically automatic now, right? These kickers are like robots. And to be frank, I was like, when he missed that kick, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Because that's the clincher. That ices the game. It puts them 2 scores up with 3 minutes to go. He was my gasser on my program, on the Big Blue Breakdown. When I talk about game balls and gassers, I give out gassers, the offense, defense, and special teams. Greg Joseph was my gasser. You can't miss that kick. You can't tell the defense that you have to go back on the field, give the Browns good field position with plenty of time left, and only a 6-point lead. You can't do that. That is totally unacceptable. Now, I don't know what was wrong with the operation. I did not talk to Joseph after the game. There may have been some timing mechanism there. I don't know. I can't tell you why he missed it. I talked to a bunch of guys afterwards. I didn't get to him. But that miss is unacceptable. And it really makes you wonder, how the Giants are going to continue to compete if they can't get their kicking situation squared. Patty, they're not good enough to fritter away not just 3 points or potentially point afters, as we saw cost them the game in Washington, but also field position. Think about that. It's not just the lost points. You're giving up field position, and you're putting, a rope around your defense's neck and saying, "Well, now you guys really got to hold up." It's not a good situation.
No, it's not. And I was going to say, Brian Dable, we talked to him on Monday about it, and he even said, you got to make that kick. And he commented that Joseph had practiced well that week, but when push came to shove and it was clutch time, not that the most important part of his job, and he didn't come through for them. So that being said, Paul, they signed Joseph off the Detroit Lions practice squad, which means he's here for another 2 weeks, because I think the minimum is 3 weeks. You have to keep a guy on your 53. What do the Giants do here? Do they give him another chance on the short week and hope that he straightens out whatever went wrong on the operation? Do they bring up Jude McAtamey? Do they go in another direction? What do you think they will do?
Here's the problem. Joseph, for his career, is only 71% successful on field goals between 40 and 49 yards. In today's game, that's not good enough. You need to be like 80%. Anything under 50 you got to be higher than that. And so I don't know what they do, because you're right. If you were a free agent that came in off the street, they could have cut him today if they wanted to. But they can't, because he was pilfered from the Lions practice squad. That handcuffs them. Now, you could easily bring up McAtamney if you wanted to off the practice squad as a practice squad elevation. You could do that. But to be frank with you, Patty, what was the reason that he was available in the first place? Because he has a cannon of a leg. We all know that. He came from Australia. Ireland. He was Irish. He's an Irish kicker, international exemption. But here's the problem. He was erratic as a field goal kicker with Rutgers. He's a kickoff specialist. He's only, in my opinion, he's only on the Giants practice squad because he's an international exemption as the 17th player. I don't believe he would be in the building if they didn't have the international exemption to use on him. I think he's a developmental prospect. He's here because, okay, he's got a cannon of a leg. Let's see over the course of time, since he doesn't cost us anything, he's an exemption. He just costs him a little bit of money. You got to pay the guy to eat, right? But what's the harm in as the exemption, letting him stick around and seeing if he can develop? Well, I haven't seen anything in practice that makes me think he's a sure thing as a kicker. And if the Giants thought he was, wouldn't he have kicked this past weekend? Why would they have pilfered a kicker from a practice squad if they thought that the Rutgers rookie was ready to kick? So
exactly.
I think this puts them in a very tight spot. Joseph is probably going to look, if he doesn't kick this weekend or this Thursday against Dallas, and they bring up the Rutgers rookie, and it's an awfully tough spot to put him in, right? If he's going to make his pro debut on national television against a division rival in a game the Giants really desperately want to win, that's a lot of heat on that kid. I don't know that you want to do that. But can you rely on Joseph? And he's going to take up a roster spot in your 53 now, as you say, for the next 2 weeks. This is a very unfortunate predicament for the Giants.
And here's the other thing to keep in mind. You mentioned practice squad bringing guys up. The Giants are banged up at slot cornerback. Chances are they're going to have to bring somebody up at that position, depending on how the injury report shakes out. 3 guys who can play the slot currently on the injury report. Who knows if they're going to be available on such a short turnaround?
Well, that's why Cordell Flott had to play slot yesterday. They would rather have Flott playing outside, but they had no choice. Mm-hmm. Art Green came up off the practice squad yesterday and actually had to get in a snap from scrimmage.
Yep. So you think, all things considered, given the circumstances, the short work week, you think they roll with Joseph? Your best guess. Do they have to, right?
I don't think they have a choice. At least he's a vet. Now, even though he does not have the most reliable of resumes, he was the guy that they decided to pick when they chose not to elevate the Rutgers rookie. He was the guy they went out to get. They had tryouts in, including Randy Bullock, who's been with the Giants twice before. Remember last year when they brought in Crosby, the thought to be retired kicker from the Packers, who was on the street? Heck, even Robbie Gould came in for a tryout last December, if you remember. But I believe Gould has filed his retirement papers, so I don't think you can call him back. But, Crosby missed the kick last year when he came back off the couch. They decided that Joseph was the best available option. So I think they've got to go with him and just cross your fingers that he's reliable. Because I think putting the rookie into that pressure cooker against Dallas on Thursday, when they may need a kick to win the game, That's a lot to ask.
Or at least the offense can maybe get a little closer. I thought maybe, they were a little too far out, but, like you said, you have to make those kicks. And Dable said it, and you could tell he wasn't happy that they missed
How
that
could
kick.
you be, Patty?
You can't. No, you can't. I mean, even though they won the game.
This kick allowed the Browns another opportunity to steal the game.
Yep. And that would have just been the ultimate kick in the, pardon the pun, kick in the pants after what happened against Washington.
It's easy to pardon the pun after they win.
Yeah, seriously. All right, Giant fans, coming up next, the Giants had a workout on Monday with a bunch of tight ends. What does that potentially mean? And who were the candidates? We'll talk about that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the very same page where you place your bets. And right now, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. Hey, Giant fans, the new Locked On NFL is here. Locked On NFL is now 2 shows every day. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. Then stop by the barbershop for a visit with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the Locked On local experts, and you get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. Make the new Locked On NFL your second listen on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traynor. My special guest is Paul Dottino. And don't forget, Giant fans, tomorrow night, we are going to have on Thursday, we're going to have the crossover show. Marcus Mosier and I are going to break down the Giants-Dallas matchup. That show will air on Thursday. And for those of you who are fans of Paul Dottino, you can catch his Big Blue Breakdown podcasts on Wednesday night. He is going live, and he does a great job. I do encourage you to check him out. All right, Paul, Monday, word came out that the Giants worked out 4 tight ends. And right away, people are like, what's going on? Is somebody injured? Are they looking to move on from somebody? What's happening with Daniel Bellinger? The tight ends were Tegan Quitoriano, Armani Rogers, Stephen Sullivan, Joel Wilson, guys who I think were with prior teams but were injured. So they brought these guys in, all shapes, all sizes. What do you think is behind that, or is it just them doing due diligence?
I'd like to say it's due diligence because they bring in a van load of guys every week. But here's the weird part about it, Patty. The NFL tryout list only listed 4 guys, and they were all tight ends. Usually the collection of guys who come in are different positions. It's odd to see them all be the same position. Maybe it'll be like one time they'll bring in 1 or 2 receivers, right? All right, that's a small group. But 4 guys, all tight ends? None of them had a really accomplished resume in the league. But they all look like they have a rather large frame and are potentially, blocking tight ends. The thing that's weird about this is the Giants have not deployed their tight ends very much in the passing game. Between the 3 active ones on the roster, do you want to consider Jacob Johnson as a tight end or a fullback? They've only targeted the tight ends 9 times out of 98 throws. Or I think it's something like that, almost 100 throws. So they've rarely deployed the tight ends in pass routes anyway. They've been keeping these guys in and helping with the blocking schemes. And again, I'm throwing out the Minnesota game because week 1, I think that was the aberration. I think you and I both agree the Giants, they did not play their football in any way, shape, or form against the Vikings. That's not the team we expected to see. What we've seen in week 2 or 3 is much more like what we think the Giants really are. So I'm just going to count those 2 games when I discuss this. they've deployed their tight ends basically as blockers. And it's working. Daniel Jones has time. And that's a good thing because he's getting the ball in the hands of his playmakers, especially Malik Neighbors. So I'm not sure exactly what this means, although Lawrence Cager is the Giants' other tight end on the practice squad. And we've known that they've liked him for a couple of years now. Heck, he's been around for 3 seasons. But he is a receiving tight end. He is not a blocking tight end. So what does this tell us? Geez, Patty, I'm kind of scratching my head at this one myself. I'm not sure. Are they trying to bring in another tight end to enhance the practice squad? That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. But they don't have any room on the 53 for a tight end. So this one puzzles me a little bit.
Yeah, usually when they bring in a bunch of guys at one position, usually there's an injury or something that's brewing
Yeah.
that necessitates a move. Now, we got the injury report. None of the tight ends were on it today, unless there's something brewing on the practice squad that we are not that we don't know about. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of. But I just found it interesting because these tight ends, having done some research on them, blockers.
Well, Cager had 2 soft tissue injuries to his leg during training camp. And that's why he didn't make the 53, because he was ticketed originally for the 53. By everything Brian Dable said, like he was the most improved player since last year, it seemed like he was going to make it. And then he had 2 soft tissue injuries to his leg over the previous couple of weeks before the only cut. There's only one cut now in the NFL. And so that sabotaged his chances. But one has to wonder, is he a little bit gimpy? And maybe that's why they looked at another tight end to maybe help out on the practice squad. I'm just not sure really what this indicates, but it's something that certainly raised an eyebrow for me.
Yeah, me too. Because interestingly enough, we've been singing the praises of the offensive line. They've done a great job, but we haven't included the tight ends who have also been helping with the run blocking and all that stuff. And it all works together, I think.
It's not fair, Patty. It's not fair, as usual. The generic media kind of paintbrushes everything with such a broad stroke. But let me go back and look at this. We look at the Giants yesterday. They gave up 2 sacks, 9 quarterback hits. The quarterback hits is a little high. You'd like that to be lower, no question about that. But I think for the most part, we would all agree that Daniel Jones was able to operate the type of offense that he wanted to operate. There were only a couple of real instances where it looked like a jailbreak.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Maybe, like I said, maybe it is due diligence that they brought in all these tight ends. Maybe they're watching something. I don't know the answer to it. I mean, that one, I usually I can see the logic, but this one I'm perplexed.
Yeah,
I got to be
this
honest.
This one's a little odd, and I mean, I know there aren't many corners out there on the street, who are capable, but with the injuries at corner, you would think, and they brought in how many corners over the last month and a half anyway, you would think that might be a position they would have brought some tryouts in today, right? Because guys are nicked up. They only had a walkthrough today. And still, they had to list Adoree Jackson and Phillips as not participating.
Mm-hmm. Do you think maybe here? I'm just going to throw this out here real quick, but do you think maybe they're gearing up to move one of the? I don't know which one they would move necessarily. I would think maybe Bellinger would make the most sense. But do you think maybe they're going to move him in exchange for either a draft pick or maybe working on something to get a corner in here? I mean, I know it's a wild idea, but
yeah, that's certainly an out of the box idea. I don't know if I would go that crazy with my speculation on this one, other than to say 4 tight ends came in and they were the 4 tryouts according to the NFL report that they brought in for the workout, and that just seemed to raise an eyebrow. I don't necessarily know that I want to read too much into it, but it's something that we should probably keep in mind.
All right. Well, that's something we'll be keeping an eye on, as well as the injury report and who's going to play slot cornerback. The Giants on a short work week. They've got the Dallas Cowboys Thursday night at MetLife Stadium. Paul will be there. I'll be there. I'm sure you guys, Giant fans, will tune in. Nationally televised game. So until then, want to thank Paul Dottino for taking time to come on with us. As always, a fountain of knowledge and a terrific broadcaster and just analyst. He does such a good job. He's actually been in the business longer than I have, if you can believe it. He's more of a dinosaur than I am. But anyway, thank you so much, Giant fans, for tuning in. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow. We'll have an all-new episode of the Locked On Giants podcast. And then on Thursday, we will have the crossover show to get you ready for Thursday night football. For Paul Dottino, I'm Patricia Traina. I'll see you again tomorrow, Giant fans.